Hi, this is the Iris Briefs tutorial. To start sewing you need stretch fabric, I will use rib, cotton jersey for gusset, elastic lace, Picot elastic, and thread matching the fabric. First check that the square on your pattern, it must be 3 by 3 centimeters. If you're sewing without an overlock, make the side seams about 14 millimeters to create a French seam. And also make the center seam of the back piece 14 millimeters to make a French seam too. Cut out all the pieces from your fabric, cotton jersey gusset and lace back pieces. Place the back pieces wrong sides together and stitch them with a zigzag stitch with 7 mm seam allowance. Next, trim the seam allowance to about 2-3 millimeters. To make it easier to enclose the seam, I iron it to one side and then fold it right side together and iron it again. Stitch it again with a zigzag stitch with 7 mm seam allowance to enclose the raw edges inside. This way you have a little bit stretchable seam and all the raw edges are inside. Next, place the gusset from your main fabric and back piece right sides together. Place the front piece the same way, right sides together with a gusset. Next, take the cotton jersey gusset and place it right side to the wrong side of the back and front piece. It's a little bit smaller than the other pieces, so match the centers of the cotton jersey gusset and other pieces. Stitch it with a straight stitch with 7 mm seam allowance. Turn it right side out. Press it and up stitch it 1 mm from the seam on the gussets with a straight stitch. Trim all the excess fabric. Next, place the side seams wrong sides together. Stitch them with a straight stitch with 7 mm seam allowance. Trim the seam allowance to about 2-3 mm. Place it right sides together and stitch it with a straight stitch with 7 mm seam allowance to enclose the raw edges. Next, take the pattern guide. On the third page you can find elastic length calculations. This measurement needs to be multiplied by the stretch coefficient of your elastic. Mine is 0.9. We will do waist. Take the measure for your size. Multiply it by the stretch coefficient of your elastic. How to know stretch coefficient of your elastic you can find in my profile. Seam allowances is not included in the calculations, so add 2 cm seam allowance for joining the elastic. Measure and cut the calculated length of your elastic. Find the middle of the elastic and mark it with a pin. Then mark 1 cm seam allowance on each side with a pin too. Then match the pins and find the quarters of the elastic. On one of the quarter marks, use the pattern to mark the cutout area on the elastic. Next, place the elastic wrong side to the right side of the briefs. Stitch it with a zigzag stitch that the needle lands into a scallop of the elastic on the left side. I leave a small gap at the back near the side seam. This is where I place the first mark and start stitching the elastic with a zigzag stitch. I take the first mark for the back cutout and match it with the end of the lace. At this point, I make a back stitch to secure the stitching. Between these two marks, I do not sew the elastic. Then I match the next mark for the back cutout with the end of the lace again. Start stitching with a zigzag stitch and making a back stitch at the beginning of the seam. Next, I matched the center mark with the side seam and the quarter mark with the center front. Then I matched the last mark with the first one, overlapping the end of the elastic. Trim all the excess fabric. After that, I finished the ends of the elastic with a narrow zigzag stitch. Next, fold the elastic to the wrong side and stitch it with a zigzag stitch, not stitch this part of the elastic on the back side. Take measure for the leg opening and multiply it by the stretch coefficient of your elastic. And add 2 cm for the seam allowance. Measure and cut calculated length of the elastic for the leg opening and make the second one of the same size. Find the center and the quarter points on the elastic the same way you did for the waistband. Find the same points on the leg opening, and also I pin both gussets together to make it easier to attach the elastic. Attach the elastic the same way as you do with the waistband. Make the second leg opening the same way. That's it, you can find more tutorials in my profile.